Happy almost 2025, so.
I know. Happy New Year to you. Oh, this is lovely.
It is lovely. And for our community, we have another beautiful roundup episode for you that really invites you to shift your perspective as you look towards a new year. Things like, what the root of the upper limit problem is, how we limit ourselves, how we view our association and relationship with money, how we diminish ourselves. There's a lot of really beautiful nuggets in this mishmash roundup episode that I'm excited to share with everyone.
It's funny because I have a thing with January where people make all these resolutions, and which to me, for a long time now, I've seen people use to beat themselves up a little bit because comes, January 15, they'll drop the diet, they'll drop the whatever thing they had resolutions about. And so I think the way we did these conversations and the snippets, we're really focusing on how to shift the energy of that and to really bring more creativity to it and almost kind of work with ourselves in a biohacking kind of way, like understanding how we function and in collaboration with ourselves. And so we've really went to look for the parts of the conversations we had this year that would really support you into doing that. So we hope you love the episode, and we certainly wish you a wonderful, wonderful 2025, and we'll be resuming our conversations with you throughout the year.
In your work, you've talked a lot about the upper limit problem. And I know that almost everybody in the world must know what that is, but I see from some of our posts that people don't. And I wonder if you could just give an explanation, because I think that's really at the heart of a lot of your work, and especially your new book.
Yes. Yes, I do have a new book coming out next month, February 15th. Your Big Leap Year. It's a day at a time book where we've broken the big leap down into something you can do every day.
Yeah, which I love. I think that's such a great idea. A little bite size. I can do this and then implement.
And it's the kind of book you don't have to start it on January 1st. You can start it on day one, whenever you want. So, you don't have to wait for the next year to roll around, thank goodness, because we need a lot of change in this world, the way things are.
Yeah.
Yes, well, the upper limit problem is one of the big discoveries I made first in my own life. I had my first big upper limit problem in 1969, but I didn't call it that. I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but later looking back on it, it was a gigantic one. The listeners and viewers may not know, but I was a real medical problem as a kid. As a baby, even, I was very obese. And then I became a very obese toddler, and I was an obese kindergartner and then an obese high school student. So anyway, I carried around all this extra weight, and nobody could figure out why, because I was the fat person in a family where everybody else was skinny. And so how's he getting all this weight? So anyway, they later found, medical science caught up to me later on in life, but it was after I'd kind of figured it out for myself. I figured something had happened in my life that turned some of my physiology upside down. And later it was discovered that there's a certain period of time when you have to activate your thyroid and pituitary gland. And somehow that didn't work for me. And so later on in life, when I was 24, I had a moment where I realized if I'm ever going to change this, I need to take full responsibility for it. And I did. And I ate only foods for the first month that I'd never eaten before. Things like fruits and vegetables. They were not on my strange thing. And I remember I ate a lot of blueberries that month. But anyway, the big point is I started eating things that I'd never eaten before. And within the first month, I'd lost 35 pounds. I weighed 300 pounds or so at the time. And 270 is still plenty fat, but to me, I felt like $1 million because I'd lost 10% of my body weight in 1 month, really, by just doing a change in my eating habits. And I don't know why it hadn't occurred to me up until age 24, but anyway, that's the way those things work. So after 35 pounds of weight loss, I was walking down the street in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I looked to my left, and there was an ice cream store there, Brigham's Ice Cream, probably still there. And there was a family of 4 eating this big ice cream sundae with bananas and chocolate sauce and everything. And I went unconscious. I just went into a trance. After 30 days of eating purely, I just went into that store and I said, give me one of those.
Gosh.
And 4 people were eating it, but the guy says, where's the rest of your party, sir? And I said, no, I am the party. And so I sat down and I don't remember finishing it, but I ate it and for 20 minutes, oh, wow, that sugar was in my body. I felt like
a shoot of heroin.
Yeah. And however, 20 minutes later, I was walking down the street again, and I got a stomachache that felt like Muhammad Ali had punched me in the belly. I actually doubled over on the street. And people were saying, are you okay, sir? Are everything okay? No. So that was a big lesson. That was my first big upper limit problem, but I hadn't seen it enough. Later on, I had the great gift when I was getting my doctorate at Stanford in the early 70s, was when Silicon Valley was just getting underway. And so we had all these incredible, brilliant engineers and executives that had family therapy and marital therapy issues. And so I got to see a lot of those folks in the counseling center that I worked at there on the Stanford campus. And I started noticing what I started calling the upper limit problem, because what would happen, the first time I saw it, on Friday afternoon, this executive I was working with got called in to the boss's office and said, this project you're working on, the pre-sales are going better than we ever imagined, and you're going to get a $350,000 bonus. Wow. And then
this was a couple decades ago. Several decades ago.
It's like $1 million today or something.
Yeah. 350,000 day, nothing, but it was a big chunk of money. So he was so excited that what he did was go home that night and create the largest argument in the 17 years of his marriage.
Oh, wow.
And I noticed that was a dramatic example of the upper limit problem. Here he goes from $350,000 bonus. Wow, I can't wait to tell my wife to.
Yeah.
And then they spent the whole weekend trying to put it back together again. Well, most everybody isn't that dramatic, but I bet if anybody, here's my assignment to you all, look at your own life and ask yourself, how many times have the big mess ups happened after something good happened, or after you had a few days or a few weeks of feeling great, Like so many people have told me, like a buddy of mine here in town, he was an alcoholic and he had many years of blackout drinking and that kind of thing. And then he got sober and he had many, many years of sobriety. And then there was this one other moment where he had the fateful thought, it's been a while now. I bet I can handle alcohol now. And he took one drink.
No.
And he said he basically woke up 9 years later.
I was thinking that the upper limit, just to summarize the upper limit, it's our ability to handle more and more of things going well. And it's not necessarily a personal issue. It's really an evolutionary issue that if we can expand our ability to receive, to give and receive more love, and to recognize when we've gone off track and, recommit or open to breathing or, getting unstuck, that really all of us, the upper limit problem is the only problem. Mm-hmm. All of your other problems can be turned into that one.
In fact, that's what I suggested earlier on, is people think of this as the universal problem, that it's all about learning to feel and sustain more and more positive energy. And in ourselves, maintaining a flow of good feeling. In our relationships, a flow of consciousness and listening and love with the people we care about. And so you can kind of trade in all your other problems for that one big problem of how much love and positive energy can I allow myself to feel. And Katie and I just started asking ourselves that very seriously 40 years ago. And we kept looking at the little glitches we had along the way. And that became the techniques we taught in Conscious Loving and other of our relationship materials.
I'm curious to the onset of this. Like, what? So, do we all have a certain amount of happy ability, or like what happens that somehow there is even a ceiling? Like, where does the ceiling come from?
Well, I think the ceiling is often put in before we can even think for ourselves. You know, if you grow up in a somber family where nobody cracks a smile, you know, you may not have as much of a flow of emotional energy. It's happening, but you don't talk about it, or perceive it. And so a lot of the people we work with, when they really trace it down, it does come down to old family patterns that oftentimes were there when they walked into the first grade.
I've also seen it because I've taught so many places around the world that almost all cultures have their own version of the upper limit problem. So in Australia, it's called the tall poppy syndrome. Don't be a tall poppy because tall poppies get... And one of my favorites, just because it's just so, is in Germany, they say, the bird that sings in the morning, in the evening will be eaten by the cat.
Yes, that's part of the thin book called The Wit and Wisdom.
Nobody wants to be eaten by the cat.
So I've seen this really in every culture that I've been in. There's a particular version. It's, when I was growing up, it was like, what will the neighbors think?
Yeah.
So that was the ceiling, is that you couldn't be, too much. Just don't be too much of yourself. And, my mother telling me, boys don't like girls who are too smart. So don't be too, all of the don't be's, that something terrible is going to happen.
And if you go to Sweden, one of the first words you'll learn is lagom, which means don't be too much, don't be too little. Just stay right in the middle of the pack.
Yeah.
So if one finds out, because I'm hearing what you're saying is also my weight, as you know, Guy and I share, and we share this experience with our bodies. And I feel like my extra, which went to 340 pounds, so I would say a nice sized castle around me. So wasn't that a limit? Like that was an upper limit problem. Like I couldn't fully enjoy life with this weight on me.
Yeah, well, imagine if you think of your fat as stored genius waiting to be cashed in. But as you cash it in, you don't need the weight anymore. The weight is a defense. You probably at some point perceived that in the situation you were growing up in, you couldn't be your full self. You couldn't be who you really were. And so you added levels of padding around that. And especially if you grow up in a family, where everybody else is chic, and you're the fat one, like was true in my family. If you look at me and my brother when we were kids, he was this fabulous looking golden boy. I mean, he looked like Tab Hunter with a crew cut, and here he was next to this gigantic blob of a kid, with glasses and a funny hat on and everything like that. So my brother frequently question would be, what family do you come from anyway?
Yeah. So it's tied to the zone of genius. You just made a link, not heard. The fat stores my genius. Like if I don't live my genius, somehow it gets capitalized in there, like it gets built in the fat.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, you're the great proof of that. Look, you're in your genius today and you're looking fabulous. And compare yourself to when 20 years ago, how much of your genius had you expressed then? That you were still hiding behind the facades of fat. And so now you don't need that because you're fully in your genius zone. And congratulations to that, by the way.
Thank you.
We're taught, and I think it's part of what we call the upper limit problem, which is, basically be too full of yourself. Don't be too much. And so that whole, and then also looking for what's wrong. Don't be too much. And when you look at yourself or a person looks at themselves, they always look at what's wrong.
Yeah.
So, and having the experience of there's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Not only is there nothing wrong, but there's a kind of exquisite, true beauty, which is essence beauty, not, made up beauty,
Not
but
aesthetics only. Yeah.
yeah. And to be able to intend that our interactions with others support the expression of who people really are and their innate beauty. So I was just reading an article which was exactly about that a woman who was very accomplished, I think it was at a film festival, it was very accomplished, and she was what I would call was diminishing.
Yes.
It wasn't she was outright dismissing, but she was sort of diminishing her accomplishments. And they were looking at that. They referenced what is called the tall poppy syndrome. And I was very interested. I looked it up. I looked up the link because that's what we call the upper limit problem. So the tall poppy syndrome is don't stick your head up too high, because what happens to a tall poppy is,
wow.
So it's a be careful.
Yeah.
Don't bring too much attention to yourself. And I think it's certainly based in fear. It's certainly based in, people are going to turn on me and, are going to make me feel like I'm being too full of myself.
Yes.
And I think if you look at the stats, you're going to find that that's how girls are raised. At a certain point, there's a sense of, it's better to give than receive, and you want to give attention to other people. Because that's what part of our job is, to make other people feel good about themselves.
I mean, if I'm completely honest, which I am with myself, I don't know about diminish, although it resonates a little bit. Like I'll speak to having lost all this weight and it wasn't that, it was, I mean, I know that it's a big accomplishment in my bones, but I talk a little bit about it like, I don't want to be feeling proud about it. And so
when you try that on, so if you were to actually be proud and kind of, sort of get into your strutting your stuff, what happens for you if you get a little strutty?
I mean, it's not familiar. It feels a little, okay. So my body got really hot, like instantly, like heat. It got a little bit, like a little bit antsy on my chair, like a little
squirmy. Yeah.
Squirmy. So if I was to go deep, but the part that's bizarre to me is that I'm actually really proud. That's the truth. I know what it took. I know the courage, the deep work, the commitment, I do. I know.
And the recommitment over and over and over, and the going up against, what you're imagining coming at you from other people's point of view and your history and it's really a climbing Everest kind of accomplishment.
It really is. And there's a part of me that definitely sees that and can sit in that. But it's almost like there is, maybe in the language I've heard you use, there's almost like a persona where I'm like, no big deal. It's like, I don't want to, especially with people that I see struggle with their weight and they haven't succeeded at something they wanted to accomplish. Then I feel like I really have to downplay that I did, as if my succeeding at it was shadowing their not succeeding at it, maybe.
Exactly. It's as if there's only so much succeeding to go around.
Exactly.
And if you're using it all up, other people aren't going to be able to have it. And so you, selfish little bitch, you.
All right. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So there is a little bit of that. There was also a little bit of, I don't want, like sometimes people hear what I succeeded at against themselves. Like they are, I mean, maybe I'm totally projecting, but I feel like sometimes as I'm speaking to what I did do, there is only so much they're willing to hear. There's almost but if it's, I mean, I thought you were going to tell me that I could take one pill and it would be fine. But when I speak the journey,
Yes.
I feel like I disturb people. Like it's almost like it's pushing against their fear of failing if they were to try, maybe.
Well, what I'm hearing, yes, I'm hearing that, but I'm also hearing that we live in an instant gratification society now, and that's been true for at least several decades, at least a couple of decades. And so the real accomplishments take practice. Practice, recommitment, practice, and and making mistakes and recommitting to no, this isn't enough. I haven't quite arrived. There's more to the journey, and my sense is that is really not encouraged in our culture. If I can't, just take a pill or take one course and then I'm an expert, that I'm not interested.
But do you think it's also that people are afraid? Like, I think the desire to have the one pill and done. Do you think there's a little flavor too of like, what if I tried the real work and I didn't succeed? Like, it feels like it has almost like a fear of like lack of confidence that maybe they've tried before. And because they didn't succeed, now what they really want is someone to fix it for them because they really can't fix it for themselves. Do you think?
I think that's certainly a possibility, but I think what is underlying all of that is that learning a skill or making a change really takes first bringing my whole self in, making that commitment, but then also in the face of everything that is sort of blowing against that, the winds that are blowing the other direction, choosing again and again, this is what I want, this is what I'm willing to do, but then also saying, I did this.
Yeah.
And I'm even wondering, if particularly women in the audience would be willing to just say, like to stand up in front of people and say, I did this.
Yeah.
I started here and I'm here and I did this.
Yeah.
So that sense of also presenting yourself.
Yes.
And what I call your muchness, that, you're really spreading yourself out to, to the edges of you and willing to have people see you as having accomplished something. I think that's, do you see any models of that? I see very few.
No, not a lot.
Like you can point to guys holding up the trophy.
Yeah.
But can you point to women going, here, I did this?
No, I don't.
Not so much.
I do hear it in women when they do it for their friends. I do hear the mama bear, like I did this so I could help my friend. I think it's more the trend. Yeah. It's funny because when you ask me, like, how does it feel for you to say, I did this and, sit in that for a moment, it's almost like I would have to give up a little bit of I kind of am attached to my struggly, I'm a hardworking human that's working on her stuff, right? And I'm kind of attached to that. And so if I were to claim that I've succeeded right? I love when you have that face and you have something to say.
I know, but I'm just so excited about what you're saying. So please.
Just that, just this idea that it's I've built a good amount. Like, what am I without? That is hard to say, but what am I without this commitment to struggle a little bit? That I'm working on something, that makes me a good person. That I'm working hard.
Yes, because I'm not. I think we get accomplishment confused with perfection, and also accomplishment confused with competition and power over.
Yeah.
It's a sort of a scarcity model that I like for particularly, I think for men, there are lots of venues in which to compete and win.
Yeah.
But we don't even have that model. Of competing and winning, and that, and like in the WNBA, when with Caitlin Clark and and competing and winning, and then also being acknowledged for that, and having fans, and this is all still very, very new for women.
That is so funny that you said that. So I played pickleball this weekend, as I do, as you know, and I'm playing really well. I'm playing really well. Like I feel the difference. I'm at the ball where I want to be. I put the ball where I want to put it. Like I'm really, and it's fun. It's fun. And I was noticing this weekend that when I do a point, like almost like the dog, what is that expression in English? You know, when you kind of like do something a little sneaky, like I did, like it happened. I did a ball that the person was absolutely, like I kind of looked to the right and threw the ball to the left.
Oh, yeah,
like,
yeah.
like a little sneaky something, you know, and it worked. Like the person thought it was going to be.
Well, and skillful. That's called using your skill.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that, because I didn't say anything out loud, but the feeling I felt was I was like, I am so sorry. Like I really wanted to apologize for doing something that made them, like I'm not a competent, like I'm really not, I don't enjoy, like when I do a ball that wins, I apologize. I'm literally like, well, I'm sorry that
That's your version of what we've been talking about.
I know.
And I just, any of you who are just listening to this, you got to view what the particular squirminess that's going on here of, what you're doing is underlying just the whole celebrating women's accomplishments.
Yeah.
And for us to celebrate our accomplishments, we can just hear how strange that is and how unfamiliar for us. And I know I'm just taking a moment because I feel sort of wisps of sadness, but also the sense of this is the frontier here.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of what we're up to. Because so I'm in such appreciation of your accomplishments, and so that when you do that little squirmy thing, I can be kind of a checkpoint that like, yes, that is true. Yes, you did accomplish that. Yeah. And I think for us, particularly for women, to be advocates for each other, of celebrating each other's accomplishments, and also the noticing if we're not really standing in acting from our muchness, we can say, hey, what did you just do there? And really calling all people, but particularly women, because we can see very much that the tall poppy syndrome applies mostly to women. I mean, all of us have heard, I'm too much. Yes. You're just too much. Just tone it down a bit and leave some room for other people. And I find if I diminish my muchness, I diminish myself, I kind of collapse. I'm not breathing as much. I don't let myself celebrate my spontaneity. I'm controlling myself. So I like to challenge people to just occupy their muchness and to encourage others. What would it be like to completely expand into your muchness?
Oh, what a party that would be. Just make a party and everybody comes off as I love that. I remember when there was a shift in my consciousness when someone did mention, it was a man I was in a relationship with, and the too much was being brought a lot. And I bought it. You know, I was like, yeah, you're right. I'm too much. But I remember one morning waking up and I said to myself, I'm a lot. I mean, I'm a big personality, but what too much based on what? Like, is it because you're not, like, are you comparing and you think you're less? So what are you doing? It's like, there's room for me to be my big self and for you to be yours. And I remember that's the day I walked out. Like I just walked out of this relationship. Yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds even as you're describing it, I can see the one up, one down.
Yeah.
And you didn't want to buy into that. No. And I think that a lot of relationships kind of stagger along. It doesn't even have to be a romantic relationship. It can be a business relationship, friends, colleagues, where that is that climbing the hill and got to climb up over you, the whole ladder structure, rather than a table, we're all sitting around the table, we're all equal and can contribute. So the circle, as compared to the, how we line up, and who's first, and who's at the end of the line, and all of the linear ways that we have structured society. So there has to be a winner and a loser. I think that also has to do with, the one up, the one down, the power over. And whenever I find myself, getting into kind of, wait a minute, what about me? I didn't get invited to that summit. What about, and I think, oh, how am I in this moment, my diminishing my muchness? And then, and when I change that at a physical level, I occupy my breath and I let myself move a little bit in all directions so I'm not getting too linear, then I actually start thinking differently. Like, how can there be room for everybody? How can everybody contribute? How can we include? But I think there's also, this whole thing about being inclusive and, and including you. I also have to want to be included. So there's an element of me celebrating my muchness and also offering, here's what I'd like. Here's what I see. Here's my vision. So I let my muchness lead rather than my, oh, am I going to fit in? And, are people going to like me?
That's really interesting. There was an episode in my life a couple of weeks ago where there was an event that I was not included in. And I felt the, teenage girl, high school, not being included, blah, blah, blah. But I remember the conversation you and I had about curiosity. And I decided to send the person who was responsible for the gathering. And I said, I don't want to develop bad feelings about this. I'm curious, like, did you not want me? Like, what is the reason that you decided not to include me? And it was writing on a little bit of course, I had been sad not to be included. And I think that was conveyed. But her response was really changed probably my perspective forever. She said, I know there's going to be a lot of drinking. And I know that it's something that you don't like to be around. And so I was really planning on doing this other gathering where I think we would be able to have deep conversations, which I know are so much more what you love. And I sat there just like, whoa, like I had made up this exclusion, which really came from her care and from her love, not at all her rejecting or not including. And I hung up the phone and I felt so joyful and loved that I don't like parties where people are trashed. That is not my thing, right?
Slurring all over each other.
Yeah, not my thing.
But you asked the question. So if you had just let that sit, you had just let that fester, then there would have been a disconnection that grew and grew. Yes. So it's really, you were willing to risk her response, whatever her response was. And so what it was reminding me of is something that has been so important for me to learn in recent years, is that in the absence of information, people make up stories.
Yes.
And so that's what I've gotten in the habit of saying is, I was just making up this story.
Well, you start the sentence.
I was just making up this story about this thing that, about this party. And here, the story that I made up, and I just wanted to check it out with you because I didn't really, I don't feel like I have as much information as I need. And so this is the story I made up.
That's really interesting. This weekend, we were just talking about this experiment. When I was studying psychology, there was a group of people that got together to, it was a hypothesis, well, that's a hard word, hypothesis to my French mouth.
Especially, yes.
Exactly. They went to this little village and in the middle of the night, there was a car with brakes, like a sound of brakes. Yes. And then they drew with chalk, they drew a body on the ground. And that's the only thing that they knew is what happened. And then the next day they went around to ask people what had happened. What did they hear? What was going on? And the result of their experiment was frightening. There was, I heard this woman running out of the thing. And I heard the noise of like people made up so many stories, like just the body and the brakes. That's all that really happened. And after that, we saw these three guys that looked really suspicious. They were just standing there. Like absolutely not what happened.
So just to amplify that by millions.
Because the world is doing a version, everyone.
The world is doing a version of this. It was reminding me of when I was a child, I loved to read. I would get my hands on anything I could read. And so the fairy tales and myths, the elephant and the blind men was what this reminded me of, is that there are all of these blind men who are touching an elephant. And one of them says, touching the tail, oh, this is a snake. And the other, the other one says, this is a monkey. And because nobody was able to see the whole, they all made up their own story about what was going on. And that's always impressed me. And, it's the whole Rashomon story of that, depending on your viewpoint, the story is different.
But what's really beautiful with this is how, because as you were speaking earlier of this power struggle that lots of people are in, I was imagining that self-love. I mean, I've always felt like love really is the answer to everything. But what you're describing here, it's like if I gave the other person the benefit of why would I assume that they exclude me? Why would I not think, well, they kind of know that I'm not, why would I take the route of the thing that actually ends up being hurtful when I'm making it up completely? Why am I not choosing a story, a movie that ends with like, yeah, my friend knows me so well, she chose not to invite me to this thing. Like,
the studies about our 50,000 thoughts or so that we have a day is that most of them are negative.
Yeah.
And no matter where everybody learns that, one of the most valuable things you can do is catch one of those and shift it on the spot.
Yeah.
To a loving thought about yourself. And my experience of love is being able to be in the same space with. Yeah. And it's kind of like muchness of,
yes.
I think what happens too is that we run into our fear. And that's what keeps people from, saying,
yes.
I'm here and I want to celebrate and I have things to contribute. And other people going, oh, you do you? What makes you think, who you think you are, blah, blah. That most people have learned in it. And I think it's about fitting in. So not standing out, not challenging people. So we also need to deal with our fear of, here I am.
And what the other person is going to do with that.
Right.
Which is interesting because I've selected the people around me to be those that would be like, yes, bring the muchness.
Yeah, bring it on. Yeah.
Bring it on. Like, I don't have a lot of friends that it's funny because as I said that, one popped in. That, right. I do around her feel like I need, exactly, that's funny. Let me be called for a conversation. But the curiosity also is what was present. And the curiosity, not fearing, because it does say something to say like, I should have been at this party. Why did you? Like, it starts from the place of like, I contribute a lot. Why would you not want me there? Which I know a lot of people don't feel. Like, a lot of people have a relation to themselves that's more critical and more unkind.
It's a central issue. I so appreciate you underlining that, because I also think it's invisible to most people. They don't realize that they're speaking to themselves critically. And catching that, I think, is the first move. Is like, oh, I was just being mean to myself, or where did that come from? And then not going down the road of why did I do that, or where did I learn that? Because that's all in the past. And it's not helpful. But to dare to invent a whole new sentence to say, like, I'm totally lovable and I deserve to be here. Something that you make up, even though it may just seem like, whoa, really.
Something happened this morning when you and I got on the call where I even forgot what I said now, but I said something that was a little bit dissing of myself. And the way you did it was really very special because you had humor. You were like, a little critical this morning, but not in it was very cute. Like, it just was just like, wow. Like, I was a little critical. What is that? And so to be the friend for others, like, and say, what did you just say? Like, you just said you're stupid? Like, well, I'm sorry. We're like, I speak English. I know what that word
so that we dare to take it to the next level with our friends, the people we care about.
Yes.
Because I'm going to hear your unconscious patterns before you do. And you're going to hear my tone before I do. And then the willingness to have that kind of openness in your communication with people you care about. To me, I treasure that.
All these young people, there were some women, some men, there was such a beautiful integrated of impact and wealth. Like in my generation, I saw a little bit of a separation. Those who do something meaningful either don't make a lot of money. Those who make a lot of money don't care if it's not that meaningful. Like I've seen, I don't know what your experience, I mean, I certainly know people that have done beautiful wealth, still being an impact. But I would say as a general feel, the people I work with often find themselves making a lot of money, not loving what they do, or really loving what they do and really struggling to make ends meet. So first of all, let's run this by you. Like, what's your sense of that?
Well, my experience is that that's part of the mythology around generating money. That we still have an idea that money is basically bad. That if you make a lot of money, it means that you're not as compassionate or a person who cares about the community well-being. And that if you do, like if you're an artist, for example, you're not supposed to focus on money. But there's this whole thing, well, how are you going to make a living if you're an artist, but you can't really have a responsible sense of, well, my art is of value. People will pay for my art just like they would pay for any other kind of, wealth or beauty or, function that they want in their lives. But there's still, I think, a lot of belief that money is bad, basically. I think that's what's at the bottom of it, is that, if you focus on money, there's something that's fundamentally wrong with you. And if you have a lot of money, it may mean that you're a little more shallow or, but those who don't care about money often are those who have money. But having been a single parent and a grad and a student in college, at the same time, with a 1-year-old, I can definitely tell you that, money is very important just to, create safety and, how to care for yourself. I think it's a really, really big issue, internationally, but especially, like earning a living. Why do we need to earn a living? There's that whole sense of if you're not earning a living, there's something wrong with you, rather than looking at the circumstances and the context and how you grew up and what's going on in the population where you grew up. There's just so much inequality that is built into that.
Where do you think, I love this, I love the way you frankly are saying, a lot of people believe that money is bad. And then if you have it, it means you're not generous or not caring. Or where do you think, I know being from France, which is it's a Catholic country, a lot of focus on the Catholic kind of approach to it all. And if you have money, you're not a spiritual person, or you don't get to go to heaven, some of those things. Where do you think, where do you think it came from that money is bad from your perspective?
Oh, well, that's such a great question. Well, I was just thinking about Jesus throwing out the money lenders, I think, if you're talking about our religious, particularly a lot of Western civilization has a Catholic or a Protestant background. And if we just look at those, going way back in England, the fights around Elizabeth I, the Protestants and the Catholics, almost all of the biggest wars have been religious wars. And I think we can just frankly say, all of that is made up. That's, the whole hierarchy, and you're going to go to hell, and original sin, and all of that is made up. And my sense is that it's made up in order to control people. That there's a belief that people need to be controlled because otherwise they're going to run amok completely. And I think that dichotomy, and people, if they're not educated to take responsibility, that's for me the modern replacement for religion is responsibility. But most people don't grow up with learning how that money is a resource, that money is energy. And what we've been focusing on, Gay and I, over many years, is that money follows energy. And that if you're really focusing on developing and expressing your genius in the world, that the value of that in our society, value is expressed through money. So in other cultures, it may be expressed through time. For example, that instead of a lot of money, you have time to be together, to co-create, to take care of each other, to work on projects together. I'm just thinking of the Amish who all get together and they raise a barn. So it's not a money exchange, but it's a labor and time exchange. And so, but for us, we have, that money is the big exchange. And so if something is of value, people will often ask, well, what does it cost? Or that didn't really cost you anything, or, does it have value? Well, people didn't pay very much for it, so it must not have value. So it's a very complex. There are entire books that have been written about money and the value of money. But one of the things I like to look at is, am I expressing what I really am wanting to do, and am I respecting myself? Am I valuing myself? Because then I think that's another aspect that gets reflected to us from the outside is if I respect myself, other people are going to tend to value me. But if I don't, they're going to pick that up.
Interesting. So you're equating the money exchange as if I see your value, then I pay for your service, let's say. And so if someone is struggling with receiving, or like even don't see their own value, like maybe they are in a situation where they're making all this money, but it doesn't really question their value. It's like their heart is not really as committed to it, it sounds.
Well, it sounds like, too, if we've worked with so many different people who get to midlife and they have a lot of money, but they've gotten it from doing something that's not in their zone of genius.
Yeah.
They've gotten it by particularly zone of excellence, when you do something really, really well, and people ask you to keep doing it because you do it so well, but it doesn't have that satisfaction of expressing your genius, of really sharing what's in you, what's your purpose to share in the world, because that combination of doing what you love and that you also are willing to have value, that's where it gets tricky for a lot of people, because there's this, it goes into the upper limit problem of like, well, who do you think you are charging that much for what you do? Or don't charge too much, because, then people won't think you are selfish or that you're snotty, or that, the whole, that it still has, I think, the whole thought of, if you're doing what you love to do, that should be enough.
Yes, that's it. It's like that the joy of doing the thing, there shouldn't be an added component of money. And so people end up doing jobs that they don't like, and then hobbies, quotation marks.
Right. Hobbies, that is what they really love to do.
It's really what they love to do, but that's not where they generate money. Like maybe someone along the way said to them, like, well, what are you going to do for your actual job? When they were talented for the guitar, or, some sort of, not as valued by society kind of, I guess, isn't doing something you love valued by society, maybe? Like it just doesn't have enough value intrinsically.
Well, just look around.
Yeah, that's,
like particularly, is what women do valued? No.
Yeah.
And how we know that is that the economy would stop dead if women stopped doing all of the things they're not paid for.